Magnus Carlsen coming out into the arena. Wow, this is an amazing setup we have in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia for the Esports World Cup, and the semi-final clash is between Hikaru and Magnus. 10 plus 0, best of 6 is what they're going to play against each other. Both players bring in their keys and put it on the pedestal. It's a very interesting concept. The one who loses gets is with the white pieces, and off we go with d4, d5, c4 and c5. This is typical Hikaru's favorite opening. He's also played it at the candidates, takes it with his queen. Magnus a bit surprised there, but Hikaru knows the ins and outs of this opening and should be able to get a good position. Pawn to e3, and few moves down the line we reach this position. The knight has come to f5 now, and here g6 played, pushing the knight away. Magnus could push the knight away, but he goes bishop g5. I love this move. He's attacking the knight. Now knight g4 is a good idea here to move the knight away, but Hikaru makes a mistake. He goes rook c6, and here is where Magnus had an incredible and beautiful move, which is knight d6 check, and Magnus is not one to miss such a move. So knight d6 check, bishop takes, and bishop takes f6. White gets a clear advantage. Black castles here, but it is clearly better here. And then as we move along, we reach this position where now Magnus is totally winning. He goes rook d7, rook takes f4, takes the pawn on b7. Too many extra pawns there for Hikaru to face with, and he goes after the g5 pawn, but Magnus now finds a beautiful tactic. Knight e5 takes, knight g5, but a4, and Hikaru resigns there. Magnus scored the first point in the game, and then in the second one, here we have Hikaru with a very good position with white pieces. You can see that he's pawn up, totally dominating with his rook, knight and bishop. Should be able to convert this into a win. Here a very good idea is h4 or just knight e3, knight d5 later preparing, or knight f5. All these options, but somehow Hikaru gets a bit nervous here. He's not able to find the plan quickly. He's thinking too much. And Magnus, of course, knows that he is in big trouble. Pawn to b5, takes, and now rook d3 played. And now rook to c6, but black is back in the game with king d7. And now maybe you can try something like bishop e5, f e5, knight e5 check is possible there, but you have to calculate bishop e5, knight takes b5 can also happen. Knight b6 check. Magnus goes king d8, bishop c3, few moves down the line, king d7 here, and now check, king d8, he comes back, king d7, needs to play a different move. Bishop b4 is the winning move here. It's the winning move here, but gives the check. Look at Hikaru. If he gives, it's a draw, it's a threefold repetition. He must not give this check. Bishop b4, and even if rook d5, e d5, that's a winning endgame. But Hikaru is unable to find it. He has 50 seconds on the clock. He goes knight b6 and a draw. Insane, and Magnus is so happy. The score is now 1.5 in the favor of Magnus Carlsen as we go into game number 3. Game number 3 opens with d4, Magnus once again, and Hikaru needs to do something special. And something special means the childhood weapon with which he grew up. Yes, he's playing the King's Indian defense. This is such a good idea. Hikaru is one of the big experts in this opening. h3. Now pawn to e5 played right into the center, d5 by Magnus Carlsen, a5 by Hikaru, and bishop e3. We're seeing well-known theory here. Knight jumps to a6. Hikaru, of course, has great experience with this stuff here. And Magnus goes for g4. He's going for something aggressive. And this is well-known stuff, how you play. But now Hikaru trying to recollect his opening. You can see how he's looking away from the board. And one of the plans is to move the knight away, which is what he does in order to play f5 at the right moment. Magnus goes rook g1, knight to c5. And you know, Magnus is dissuading Hikaru from going f5 because the rook is on g1. Bishop d7 played. Now queen to c2 and king h8. Hikaru preps the move f5 here. This is what he would like to get in the position. Magnus thinking hard. Will he go long castle here? That's quite the daring move, but I guess he will do it. Yes, he long castles here, and Hikaru now can go f5. Excellent chess. This is high quality chess, and Hikaru is feeling like the energy flowing his way because it's something that he loves to play, the King's Indian defense, and he feels so comfortable. Magnus thinking hard here. He must take on f5 to open up the g file for the rook. Takes. But now there are big threats. There is f4 coming in, and you might have to give up your bishop. h4 played by Magnus. And look at this. If you play f4, bishop d2, black has an insanely strong move here, which is knight b4. After takes, the rook opens up, and let's say you go knight to b1, you have bishop a4, and it's a winning position here for black. So these are the problems that are coming in, and Hikaru can go f4 when Magnus has to part away with his precious bishop there on e3. And Hikaru takes his time, and rightly so for this moment, because it is something which is very committal in nature. He could take on e4 potentially, but f4 is the move. He plays it, and Magnus instantly takes it. Knight takes on c5. And now black's position looks very, very nice because the king on h8, believe it or not, is very, very safe. And you can play bishop f6, putting pressure on the h4 pawn. You can even trade rooks via the g file. You also have some play on the queen side with a4, knight b3 and stuff like this. So overall, Hikaru is playing on the entire chessboard. Although the engine considers this position around even, I would say humanly, this is very, very good for black. And this time it's Magnus's time to think. Knight g5, h6, goes back to f3, bishop f6, h5, and now rook g8 offering a trade. Bishop comes up, and queen e7 connecting the rooks. Takes, b4 played, pushing the knight away. But after ab, knight a6, there is pressure on the b4 pawn here. Too much pressure actually. And here it's already queen to b2, trying to defend the pawn. The bishop comes out to g4, not just putting pressure on the knight, but also on the h5 pawn that is there. Rook to h1, trying to defend that pawn. And pawn to c5, an excellent move here by Hikaru, because now if pawn takes pawn, he wants to take back. B takes c6, and Magnus has to decide between taking en passant, pushing the pawn. Let's say you do en passant, b takes c6, and then c5 again with the idea of bringing the knight in. Also the b file opens up, so he pushes, but now knight to b4, and Magnus is in big trouble. The knight is amazingly positioned, the bishop is It's a wonder that this position is only slightly worse for white. It looks terrible. Kicking d2. And now Hikaru goes after the h5 pawn. And look at Hikaru there. He has a spring in his step. He knows he has a great chance to equalize this game against Magnus. And this is a big opportunity here. Magnus, on the other hand, trying to figure out what exactly should he do with this position. How can he ease off the pressure here? He goes knight a2, trying to trade. And there is an amazing move that Hikaru has. This bishop is kind of blocked in by its own pawns. Can now turn around from d8. This is what Hikaru does, coming to a5. Fantastic chess here by Hikaru Nakamura. And loving it. The way in which he's maneuvering his pieces is amazing. Amazing. Magnus can take knight b4, but then bishop a5, and the black bishop sits there on a beautiful square on b4. And this game has been such a model game by Hikaru. Magnus thinking here is coming down to 5 minutes on the clock. He takes, Hikaru can take back with the pawns. He takes b4, but bishop a5 makes a lot of sense. And now it's also important to control the a file, because if after taking I can get my rook on the a file, that would be big problems there. So Magnus here thinking hard. What to do is the question. And he goes king d3, and now c takes b4 is a very nice move, because then you are, you open up another diagonal this way. Hikaru takes with the bishop, queen comes to a1, controlling the a file. Okay, for now you don't want to be taking this pawn because it can get a bit risky with the rook on the open h file. So king h7 by Hikaru, just improving his position. And now can Magnus enter with queen a7? It feels like Magnus has managed to, calm the position down. Maybe there is king c2. Maybe possible to go here. b6. And now white has an important decision. You can see the crowd there completely zoned in. Hikaru trying to look at all the possibilities, marking the pawns as if he's streaming there. And now Magnus can go rook g1. It seems, but he blunders. He goes queen a6, and look at Hikaru's expression. He's seen it. He plays bishop a5, traps the queen. And Magnus shaking his head there. Insane. Bishop king d3. And now bishop c8 traps the queen almost. Bishop c8. The crowd is super excited. Hikaru is nodding his head. He's bobbing his head there. Oh my god, the crowd is already clapping in between the game. So interesting here, the esports vibe. Bishop b7. And he has to give up the queen, knight h4, but now it's all over. f3 played. Hikaru is winning, brings his queen in. Magnus resigns, and Hikaru scores the equalizer. 1.5 after 3 games. Magnus moves out. Pawn to d4 in this position. We are into the 4th game of the match between Magnus and Hikaru Nakamura. And this already looks like a great position for Magnus. He did lose the last game. Bishop a3, trying to put pressure on the c5 pawn. Knight jumps into b4. Takes. Pawn takes here. And already this is very, very nice, because the c3 square is weak. And after rook takes, queen takes, he jumps knight f4. The knight comes to c3. Takes on b7. And now after queen takes d4, takes on e2, rook jumps in. You can see that the a2 pawn is very, very weak. And now after queen d8, Magnus does chop it off. The knight comes to b6, trying to create this huge threat with knight d7, but queen e7, and after queen c8, rook b2 played. The b3 pawn is put under pressure, but it's actually a dangerous position because Hikaru can now move in with his knight to d7 here, threatening rook d1, take on f8, and then rook d8. That's the plan. So let's see if he manages to do that here. And yes, knight to d7 on the board. We have now Magnus has to be careful. He shouldn't take this pawn, as after rook d1 the position is equal. So instead goes rook d2, takes, and we make a few moves here. h5, queen d5 played. Hikaru goes back with the queen to g4, and of course hoping that after takes he can try and create a perpetual here with queen c8, queen f5, but instead king h7 played. And now rook a1. Hikaru is one of the best defenders out there. He's trying his best, but here black has a very powerful move, that is a4. And if Magnus finds it, yes he does. Rook a4, there is rook d1 check. ba4 means that there is the b pawn running, and you can see there Hikaru almost is lost there. And so after ba, b3, a5, b2, you can see there the b pawn is queening, and Magnus won the game. The beautiful thing about this game was Magnus's reaction when he started to win there. When he pushed his pawn to a4, look at the number of people who've come here to root for their favorite team. And this is where you can see that there is a lot of crowd which has come in, and which is very cool for the sport. It's a very different environment, and look at Magnus there. After he was winning, he looked at the crowd and he shushes the crowd there, asks them to keep quiet because he was winning, and now he's won that game. 2.5, 1.5 is the score now in the favor of Magnus Carlsen. And now we are into game number 5. And this time we have the players settling in. The game is about to begin. Magnus has the white pieces with 2 games to go. He just needs 1 point. He looks in good spirits here. And Hikaru, look at him. This means so much for Hikaru. Will he manage to make a comeback here? He needs to win both the games to win the match outright. 1.5 out of 2 to force an Armageddon. We have game number 5 starting. This time Magnus goes e4. He's like, I don't want to face Hikaru's King's Indian defense. But this time the game was very, very simplified, as the players played a very simple opening. And I think Magnus's strategy was that, well, a draw is good for me, so why should I try too much here? Then I just need 2 draws now in 2 games and I will move forward. So you can see the game was very, very simplified, and Hikaru throughout the game wasn't happy. It's like, he didn't really get a chance. For a 10-minute game, the accuracy was quite high, but a draw is what ensued here between the players. The score is now 3-2 in the favor of Magnus. As the next game begins, Hikaru has the white pieces. He opens with d4, goes into a Catalan. Magnus takes on c4, queen c2 played, a6, a4, and we are going into mainline territory because this is something that I guess Magnus is happy playing when he just needs a draw. He's okay with theory. And here it's a very solid line. Bishop f4, played by Hikaru. Bishop d6, offering a trade. Now knight to c3. Knight d7, rook d1, takes. Knight comes to b6, queen b3, pushes the knight to d5, attacking the f4 pawn. e3 played. He takes on c3, and now pawn to b5. He goes c4 here, and then b takes c4, queen takes c4, and bishop d5. And this is where Magnus finds a very good move, which is to push his pawn to c5, and he manages to get some space rolling in the position. And although a6 pawn was lost, he got his pawn to c4, which is a great position. And after queen d6 here, rook c6, queen came back to a3. It was Magnus who was putting a lot of pressure here on the position here, and then we reach this moment where the a4 pawn is taken and knight comes to e3. Very intense. Magnus has 3 minutes 45 seconds. Hikaru has 3 minutes 7 seconds. Rook comes to d8. Now after take, it's still equal. A draw is good for Magnus. And knight d2, a massive blunder here. Hikaru is like, what the hell did Magnus just do here? Isn't this completely winning for me? He finds knight f1 or not? Because this is a pin. He does find knight f1, and look at that. Magnus is so unhappy, and Hikaru starts bobbing rook a2. He's back in the game, and Magnus like, how the hell did I miss that? This is just over. Queen e3. He loses a piece. Queen a8. Now just take the knight on d2, rook a1. What a big miss by Magnus. He just simply missed this move, knight f1. He lost his knight there. And now Hikaru Nakamura is winning here, which means that the match will be 3-3 and resigns there. Hikaru gets the win. Super happy there. And Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru, what a battle between these two players. We are moving in to the Armageddon now. And both players have to make a bid. Who will get the white? Who will get the black? The one who makes the lowest bid gets the black. Look at Hikaru there. He's managed to make his fans so happy. And there you're given a sheet to write down the timings there. And that was the moment. You can see here knight d2 played, a blunder, a big mistake, and the expressions of the players were epic. Yes, knight f1 found, and Magnus couldn't believe what he had just done. And Hikaru so happy, queen e3, and managed to win there. It's time for the Armageddon now. Hikaru Nakamura waiting there. He has made the low. Hikaru's bid was lower, 6 minutes 12 seconds, which means Hikaru gets the black pieces here. And the game is about to begin. The players are in their place. Everything to play for. A spot in the finals. Also a lot of pride at stake. And the Esports World Cup 2025 for the first time ever features chess. And Magnus and Hikaru have made it to the semis. And now everything down to this final game of Armageddon. Beautiful scenes from the venue as the game begins. Knight f3 by Magnus, knight f6 by Hikaru, c4, g6, knight to c3, bishop g7, and Hikaru once again plays his favorite King's Indian defense. But this time Magnus goes for the more classical approach with bishop e2 and short castle, not risking, plays the bionic attack with b4. Last time he did play h3, g4, c5 played, pawn to a4, and rook a5. He takes the pawn. Magnus is quite well prepared here, and I'm pretty sure so is Hikaru. Rook a3. He pushes his pawn to f5. Generally, you do it with the pawn on h6 in order to stop knight g5. But here, f5 was played directly, and this does give Magnus the opportunity to jump with knight g5. Look at that. Look at the focus by Hikaru. Also by Magnus there. These two have had such amazing rivalries. Hikaru has 5 minutes 58 seconds. Magnus has 9 minutes on the clock. Knight to g5. Knight to c7. And then bishop d2. Here plays pawn to h6, pushing the knight backwards. Rook a6, and now pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn. You can see that black's pieces are slowly coming to life, but white has a very important resource here, which is the e4 square. So knight to e4, knight f6, and queen c2 played. Knight takes knight, bishop takes, queen f6. The bishop comes to c3, and now Hikaru starts playing on the king side. Magnus goes knight h2, rook f e8. The knight jumps to g4, attacking the queen. Queen f8. And now queen d3. That's a mistake because knight d4. Black is back in the game. White has no advantage. Rook a4 takes. Rook takes b6 taken here. And rook a3 threatening. Rook takes c3. Queen takes c3. Knight e2 check. So the king comes to f1. Rook a2 played. And now knight to d1 is on the board. And here Hikaru now has to be careful that he doesn't fall for this trick of bishop a4 attacking the knight, because he wants to checkmate Magnus on the f2 square. But he falls for it. Bishop a4 and Magnus finds queen b1, and look at Hikaru. What a move by Magnus. He's attacking a2. Also rook b8 threatened. Insane. And Hikaru's expression says it all. He had missed this move completely, and Magnus Carlsen knows that he's winning here. You can see him. There's no way to stop both these threats, and all that Hikaru can do now is just, it's totally lost. He can take on d1, but then he loses his rook on a2. He takes on d1, queen a2, and here Magnus Carlsen wins. What a big victory for Magnus. Hikaru there has a smile on the face. Magnus also very, very respectful, and the huge game and match between Magnus and Hikaru ends with a victory for Magnus as he moves into the finals. And what an encounter this was. Kudos to both the players for a big fight, and kudos to Magnus for reaching the finals where he will face Firouzja, while Hikaru will take on Arjun Erigaisi for the third place. It was an amazing encounter.